Hello. After quite a lot of weeks of hiatus, here is The Shack chapter 14. So just to remind you what's been happening, Sarayu took Mac off to meet with Wisdom, and Wisdom helped Mac to see that he was presuming to judge God, and he could leave the judgment to God in the future. And then he's been back and had a conversation with Papa. This chapter's called Verbs and Other Freedoms. Mac stepped outside into the mid-afternoon sun. He felt an odd mixture of being wrung out like a rag and yet exhilaratingly alive. What an incredible day this had been, and it was barely half over. For a moment he stood undecided before wandering down to the lake. When he saw the canoes tied up to the dock, he knew it would probably forever be bittersweet, but the thought of taking one out on the lake energised him for the first time in years. Untying the last one at the end of the dock, he gently slid into it and began paddling toward the other side. For the next couple of hours he circled the lake, exploring its nooks and crannies. He found 2 rivers and a couple of creeks that either fed from above or emptied down towards the lower basins, and he discovered a perfect spot to drift and watch the waterfall. Alpine flowers blossomed everywhere, adding splashes of colour to the landscape. This was the most calm and consistent sense of peace that Mac had felt in ages, if ever. He even sang a few songs, a couple of old hymns and a couple of old folk songs, just because he wanted to. Singing was also something he had not done in a long time. Reaching back into the distant past, he began to voice the silly little song he used to sing to Kate. Katie, beautiful Katie, you're the only one that I adore. He shook his head as he thought about his daughter, so tough but so fragile. He wondered how he might find a way to reach her heart. He was no longer surprised how easily tears could come to his eyes. At one point he turned to watch eddies and halls made by the oar blade and stern, and when he turned back, Sarayu was sitting in the prow, looking at him. Her sudden presence made him jump. "Geez!" he exclaimed. "You startled me." "I'm sorry, Mackenzie," she apologised, "but supper is almost ready, and it is time to invite you to make your way back to the shack." "Have you been with me the entire time?" inquired Mac, a little ramped from the adrenaline rush. "Of course, I'm always with you." "Then how come I didn't know it?" asked Mac. "Lately, I've been able to tell when you're around." "For you to know or not," she explained, "has nothing at all to do with whether I am actually here or not. I am always with you. Sometimes I want you to be aware in a special way, more intentional." Mac nodded that he understood and turned the canoe towards the distant shore and the shack. He now distinctly felt her presence in the tingle down his spine. They both smiled simultaneously. "Will I always be able to see you or hear you like I do now, even if I'm back home?" Sarayu smiled. "Mackenzie, you can always talk to me and I will always be with you, whether you sense my presence or not." "I know that now, but how will I hear you?" "You will learn to hear my thoughts in yours, Mackenzie," she reassured him. "Will it be clear? What if I confuse you with another voice? What if I make mistakes?" Sarayu laughed, the sound like tumbling water, only set to music. "Of course you will make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. But you will begin to better recognise my voice as we continue to grow our relationship." "I don't want to make mistakes," Mac grunted. "Oh, Mackenzie," responded Sarayu, "mistakes are a part of life, and Papa works his purpose in them too." She was amused, and Mac couldn't help but grin back. He could see her point well enough. This is so different from everything I've known, Sarayu. Don't get me wrong, I love what you all have given me this weekend, but I have no idea how to go back to my life. Somehow it seemed easier to live with God when I thought of him as the demanding taskmaster, or even to cope with the loneliness of the great sadness. You think so? She asked. Really? At least then I seemed to have things under control. Seemed is the right word. What did it get you? The great sadness and more pain than you could bear. Pain that spilled over even on those you care for the most. According to Papa, that's because I'm scared of emotions, he disclosed. Sarayu laughed out loud. I thought that little exchange was hilarious. I am afraid of emotions, Mac admitted, a bit perturbed that she seemed to make light of it. I don't like how they feel. I've hurt others with them, and I can't trust them at all. Did you create all of them, or only the good ones? Mackenzie. Sarayu seemed to rise up into the air. He still had a difficult time looking right at her, but with the late afternoon sun reflecting off the water, it was even worse. Emotions are the colours of the soul. They are spectacular and incredible. When you don't feel, the world becomes dull and colourless. Just think how the great sadness reduced the range of colour in your life down to monotones and flat greys and blacks. So, help me understand them, pleaded Mac. Not much to understand, actually. They just are. They are neither bad nor good. They just exist. Here is something that will help you sort this out in your mind, Mackenzie. Paradigms power perception, and perceptions power emotions. Most emotions are responses to perception, what you think is true about a given situation. If your perception is false, then your emotional response to it will be false too. So check your perceptions, and beyond that, check the truthfulness of your paradigms, what you believe. Just because you believe something firmly doesn't make it true. Be willing to re-examine what you believe. The more you live in the truth, the more your emotions will help you to see clearly. But even then, you don't want to trust them more than me. Mac allowed his oar to turn in his hands as he let it play in the water's movements. It feels like living out of relationship, trusting and talking to you, is a bit more complicated than just following rules. What rules are they, Mackenzie? Well, all those things the scriptures tell us we should do. Okay, she said with some hesitation. And what might those be? You know, he answered sarcastically, about doing good things and avoiding evil, being kind to the poor, reading your Bible, praying, going to church, things like that. I see. And how is that working out for you? He laughed. Well, I've never done it very well. I have moments that aren't too bad, but there's always something I'm struggling with or feeling guilty about. I just figured I needed to try harder, but I find it difficult to sustain that motivation. Mackenzie, she chided, her words flowing with affection. The Bible doesn't teach you to follow rules. It's a picture of Jesus. While words may tell you what God is like, and even what he may want from you, you cannot do any of it on your own. Life and living is in him and no other. My goodness, you didn't think you could live on the righteousness of God on your own, did you? Well, I thought so, sorta, he said sheepishly. But you got to admit, rules and principles are simpler than relationships. It is true that relationships are a whole lot messier than rules, but rules will never give you answers to the deep questions of the heart, and they will never love you. Dipping his hand in the water, he played, watching the patterns his movements made. I'm realising how few answers I have to anything. You've turned me upside down or inside out or something. Mackenzie, religion is about having the right answers, and some of those answers are right. But I am about the process that takes you to the living answer. And once you get to him, he will change you from the inside. There are a lot of smart people who are able to say a lot of right things from their brain because they have been told what the right answers are. But they don't know me at all. So really, how can their answers be right, even if they are right, if you understand my drift? She smiled at her pun. So even though they might be right, they are still wrong. I understand what you're saying. I did that for years after seminary. I had the right answers sometimes, but I didn't know you. This weekend, sharing my life with you has been far more illuminating than any of those answers. They continued to move lazily with the current. So, will I see you again? Of course. You might see me in a piece of art, or music, or silence, or through people, or in creation, or in your joy and sorrow. My ability to communicate is limitless, living and transforming, and it will always be tuned to Papa's goodness and love. And you will hear and see me in the Bible in fresh ways. Just don't look for rules and principles. Look for relationship, a way of coming to be with us. It still won't be the same as having you sit on the bow of my boat. No, it will be far better than you've yet known, Mackenzie. And when you finally sleep in this world, we'll have an eternity together, face to face. And then she was gone, although he knew that she was not really. So please, help me live in the truth, he said out loud. Maybe that counts as prayer, he wondered. When Mac entered the cabin, he saw that Jesus and Sarayu were already there and seated at the table. Papa was busy as usual, bringing platters of wonderful smelling dishes, again only a few that Mac recognised, and even those he had to look at twice to make sure they were something he was familiar with. Conspicuously absent were any greens. He headed for the bathroom to clean up, and when he returned the other three had already begun to eat. He pulled up the fourth chair and sat down. "You don't really have to eat, do you?" he asked, as he began to ladle something into his bowl that resembled a thin seafood soup with squid and fish and other more ambiguous delicacies. "We don't have to do anything," Papa stated rather strongly. "Then why do you eat?" Mac inquired. "To be with you, honey. You need to eat, so what better excuse to be together?" "Anyway, we all like to cook," added Jesus, "and I enjoy food a lot. Nothing like a little shaumi, ugali, nipli or kuri bananji to make your taste buds happy. Follow that with some sticky toffee pudding or tiramisu and hot tea. Yum! It doesn't get any better than that." Everyone laughed and then busily resumed passing platters and helping themselves. As Mac ate, he listened to the banter between the three. They talked and laughed like old friends who knew one another intimately. As he thought about it, that was assuredly more true for his hosts than anyone inside or outside creation. He was envious of the carefree but respectful conversation and wondered what it would take to share that with Nan, and maybe even with some friends. Again, Mac was struck by the wonder and sheer absurdity of the moment. His mind wandered through the incredible conversations that had involved him during the previous 24 hours. Wow! He had only been here one day? And what was he supposed to do with all this when he got back home? He knew that he would tell Nan everything. She might not believe him, and not that he would blame her. He probably wouldn't believe any of it either. As his mind picked up speed, he felt himself withdrawing from the others. None of this could be real. He closed his eyes and tried to shut out the exchanges going on around him. Suddenly, it was dead silent. He slowly opened one eye, half expecting to be waking up at home. Instead, Papa, Jesus and Sarayu were all staring at him with silly grins plastered to their faces. He didn't even try to explain himself. He knew that they knew. Instead, he pointed to one of the dishes and asked, "Could I try some of that?" The interactions resumed, and this time he listened. But again he felt himself withdrawing. To counteract it, he decided to ask a question. "Why do you love us humans?" I suppose As he spoke, he realised he hadn't formed his question very well. "I guess what I want to ask is, why do you love me when I have nothing to offer you?" "If you think about it, Mac," Jesus answered, "it should be very freeing to know that you can offer us nothing, at least not anything that can add or take away from who we are. That should alleviate any pressure to perform." "And do you love your own children more when they perform well?" added Papa. "No, I see your point." Mac paused. "But I do feel more fulfilled because they're in my life. Do you?" "No," said Papa. "We are already fully fulfilled within ourselves. You are designed to be in community as well, made as you are in our very image. So for you to feel that way about your children, or anything that adds to you, is perfectly natural and right. Keep in mind, Mackenzie, that I am not a human being, not in my very nature, despite how we have chosen to be with you this weekend. I am truly human, in Jesus, but I am a totally separate other in my nature." "You do know, of course you do," Max said apologetically, "that I can only follow that line of thought so far, and then I get lost and my brain turns to mush." "I understand," acknowledged Papa. "You cannot see in your mind's eye something that you cannot experience." Mac thought about that for a moment. "I guess so. Whatever. See? Mush." When the others stopped laughing, Mac continued, "You know how truly grateful I am for everything. But you've dumped a whole lot of stuff in my lap this weekend. What do I do when I get back? What do you expect of me now?" Jesus and Papa both turned to Sarayu, who had a forkful of something halfway to her mouth. She slowly put it back down onto her plate, and then answered Mac's confused look. "Mac," she began, "you must forgive these two. Humans have a tendency to restructure language according to their independence and need to perform. So when I hear language abused in favour of rules over sharing life with us, it is difficult for me to remain silent." "As it must," added Papa. "So what exactly did I say?" asked Mac, now quite curious. "Mac, go ahead and finish your bite. We can talk as you eat." Mac realised that he too had a fork halfway to his mouth. He gratefully took the bite as Sarayu began to speak. As she did, she seemed to lift off her chair and shimmer with a dance of subtle hues and shades, and the room was faintly filling with an array of aromas, incense-like and heady. "Let me answer that by asking you a question. Why do you think we came up with the 10 Commandments?" Again Mac had a fork halfway to his mouth, but took the bite anyway while he thought of how to answer Sarayu. "I suppose, at least what I've been taught, is that it's a set of rules that you expected humans to obey in order to live righteously in your good graces." "If that were true, which it is not," Sarayu countered, "then how many do you think lived righteously enough to enter our good graces?" "Not very many, if people are like me," Mac observed. "Actually, only one succeeded, Jesus. He not only obeyed the letter of the law, but fulfilled the spirit of it completely. But understand this, Mackenzie, to do that, he had to rest fully and dependently upon me." "Then why did you give us those commandments?" asked Mac. "Actually, we wanted you to give up trying to be righteous on your own. It was a mirror to reveal just how filthy your face gets when you live independently. But as I'm sure you know, there are many who think they are made righteous by following the rules. But can you clean your face with the same mirror that shows you how dirty you are? There is no mercy or grace in rules, not even for one mistake. That's why Jesus fulfilled all of it for you, so that it no longer has jurisdiction over you. And the law that once contained impossible demands, "Thou shalt not," actually becomes a promise we fulfill in you. She was on a roll now, her countenance billowing and moving. But keep in mind that if you live your life alone and independently, the promise is empty. Jesus laid the demand of the law to rest. It no longer has any power to accuse or command. Jesus is both the promise and its fulfillment. Are you saying I don't have to follow the rules? Mac had now completely stopped eating and was concentrating on the conversation. Yes, in Jesus you are not under any law. All things are lawful. You cannot be serious. You're messing with me again, moaned Mac. Child, interrupted Papa, you ain't heard nothing yet. Mackenzie, Sarayu continued, those who are afraid of freedom are those who cannot trust us to live in them. Trying to keep the law is actually a declaration of independence, a way of keeping control. Is that why we like the law so much? To give us some control? Asked Mac. It is much worse than that, resumed Sarayu. It grants you the power to judge others and feel superior to them. You believe you are living to a higher standard than those you judge. Enforcing rules, especially in its more subtle expressions like responsibility and expectation, is a vain attempt to create certainty out of uncertainty. And contrary to what you might think, I have a great fondness for uncertainty. Rules cannot bring freedom. They only have the power to accuse. Whoa! Max suddenly realised what Sarayu had said. Are you telling me that responsibility and expectation are just another form of rules we are no longer under? Did I hear you right? Yup, Papa interjected again. Now we're in it. Sarayu, he is all yours. Mac ignored Papa, choosing instead to concentrate on Sarayu, which was no easy task. Sarayu smiled at Papa and then back at Mac. She began to speak slowly and deliberately. Mackenzie, I will take a verb over a noun any time. She stopped and waited. Mac wasn't at all sure about what he was supposed to understand by her cryptic remark, and said the only thing that came to mind. Huh? She opened her hands to include Jesus and Papa. I am a verb. I am that I am. I will be who I will be. I am a verb. I am alive, dynamic, ever active and moving. I am a being verb. Max still felt he had a blank stare on his face. He understood the words she was saying, but it just wasn't connecting yet. And as my very essence is a verb, she continued, I am more attuned to verbs than nouns. Verbs such as confessing, repenting, living, loving, responding, growing, reaping, changing, sowing, running, dancing, singing, and on and on. Humans, on the other hand, have a knack for taking a verb that is alive and full of grace and turning it into a dead noun or principle that reeks of rules. Something growing and alive dies. Nouns exist because there is a created universe and physical reality. But if the universe is only a mass of nouns, it is dead. Unless I am, there are no verbs, and verbs are what makes the universe alive. And Mac was still struggling, although a glimmer of light seemed to begin to shine in his mind. And this means what, exactly? Sarayu seemed unperturbed by his lack of understanding. For something to move from death to life, you must introduce something living and moving into the mix. To move from something that is only a noun to something dynamic and unpredictable, to something living and present tense is to move from law to grace. May I give you a couple of examples? Please do, assented Mac. I'm all ears. Jesus chuckled, and Mac scowled at him before turning back to Sarayu. The faintest shadow of a smile crossed her face as she resumed. Then let's use your two words, responsibility and expectation. Before your words became nouns, they were first my words. Nouns with movement and experience buried inside of them, the ability to respond and expectancy. My words are alive and dynamic, full of life and possibility. Yours are dead, full of law and fear and judgment. That is why you won't find the word responsibility in the scriptures. Oh boy, Mac grimaced, beginning to see where this was going. We sure seem to use it a lot. Religion must use law to empower itself and control the people who they need in order to survive. I give you an ability to respond, and your response is to be free to love and serve in every situation, and therefore each moment is different and unique and wonderful. Because I am your ability to respond, I have to be present in you. If I simply gave you a responsibility, I would not have to be with you at all. It would now be a task to perform, an obligation to be met, something to fail. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, Mac said again without enthusiasm. Let's use the example of friendship and how removing the element of life from a noun can drastically alter a relationship. Mac, if you and I are friends, there is an expectancy that exists within our relationship. When we see each other or are apart, there is expectancy of being together, of laughing and talking. That expectancy has no concrete definition. It is alive and dynamic, and everything that emerges from our being together is a unique gift, shared by no one else. But what happens if I change that expectancy to an expectation, spoken or unspoken? Suddenly, law has entered into our relationship. You are now expected to perform in a way that meets my expectations. Our living friendship rapidly deteriorates into a dead thing with rules and requirements. It is no longer about you and me, but about what friends are supposed to do, or the responsibilities of a good friend. Or the responsibilities of a husband or a father or an employee or whatever. I get the picture, Mac said. I would much rather live in expectancy. As I do, mused Sarayu. But if you didn't have expectations and responsibilities, wouldn't everything just fall apart? Only if you are of the world, apart from me and under the law. Responsibilities and expectations are the basis of guilt and shame and judgment, and they provide the essential framework that promotes performance as the basis for identity and value. You know well what it is like not to live up to someone's expectations. Boy, do I, Mac mumbled. It's not my idea of a good time. He paused briefly, a new thought flashing through his mind. Are you saying you have no expectations of me? Papa now spoke up. Honey, I've never placed an expectation on you or anyone else. The idea behind expectations requires that someone does not know the future or outcome and is trying to control behaviour to get the desired result. Humans try to control behaviour largely through expectations. I know you and everything about you. Why would I have an expectation other than what I already know? That would be foolish. And beyond that, because I have no expectations, you never disappoint me. What? You've never been disappointed in me? Mac was trying hard to digest this. Never, Papa stated emphatically. What I do have is a constant and living expectancy in our relationship, and I give you an ability to respond to any situation and circumstance in which you find yourself. To the degree that you resort to expectations and responsibilities, to that degree you neither know me nor trust me. And, interjected Jesus, To that degree, you will live in fear. But Mac wasn't convinced. But don't you want us to set priorities? You know, God first, then whatever, followed by whatever. The trouble with living by priorities, Sarayu spoke, is that it sees everything as a hierarchy, a pyramid. And you and I have already had that discussion. If you put God at the top, what does that really mean, and how much is enough? How much time do you give me before you can go on about the rest of your day, the part that interests you so much more? Papa again interrupted. You see, Mackenzie, I don't just want a piece of you and a piece of your life. Even if you were able, which you are not, to give me the biggest piece, that is not what I want. I want all of you, and all of every part of you in your day. Jesus now spoke again. Mac, I don't want to be first among a list of values. I want to be at the centre of everything. When I live in you, then together we can live through everything that happens to you. Rather than a pyramid, I want to be the centre of a mobile, where everything in your life, your friends, your family, your job, your thoughts, your activities, is connected to me, but moves with the wind, in and out and back and forth, in an incredible dance of being. And I, concluded Sarayu, I am the wind. She smiled hugely and bowed. There was silence while Mac collected himself. He had been gripping the edge of the table with both hands, as if to hold on to something tangible in the face of such an onslaught of ideas and images. Well, enough of all this, stated Papa, getting up from her chair. Time for some fun. You all go ahead while I put away the stuff that'll spoil. I'll take care of the dishes later. What about devotion? Asked Mac. Nothing is a ritual, Mac, said Papa, picking up a few platters of food. So tonight we're doing something different. You are going to enjoy this. As Mac stood up and turned to follow Jesus to the back door, he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned around. Sarayu was standing close, looking at him intently. Mackenzie, if you would allow me, I would like to give you a gift for this evening. May I touch your eyes and heal them, just for tonight? Mac was surprised. I see well enough, don't I? Actually, Sarayu said apologetically, you see very little, even though for a human you see fairly well. But just for tonight, I would love you to see a bit of what we see. Then by all means, Mac agreed. Please touch my eyes and more if you choose. As she reached her hands towards him, Mac closed his eyes and leaned forward. Her touch was like ice, unexpected and exhilarating. A delicious shiver went through him, and he reached up to hold her hands to his face. There was nothing there, so he slowly began to open his eyes. And that's the end of chapter 14. Join me next time for chapter 15. And if this is the first time you've listened to a bit of The Shack, this is it. This is the book. And the easiest thing, if you want to listen from the beginning, is to go to the Blurton and Dresden YouTube channel, and there's a playlist there called The Shack, and it's got all of them in it. Apart all that I've read so far anyway. Bye.